Swamps have long been associated with an eerie, unsettling atmosphere, and for good reason. These murky, humid environments are often teeming with life, some of it harmless, but much of it dangerous. From swarms of disease-carrying insects to lurking predators like alligators, swamps can feel like nature's version of a horror movie set. It's no wonder they've become the backdrop for countless tales of mystery and terror. Over the years, people have stumbled upon some truly bizarre and frightening discoveries in these wetlands. Here are 20 chilling things that have been found in swamps. Number 20. Bahia horned beast. Now we have a swamp ghost story of sorts, because we're talking about an infamous photograph that captured a creature later known as the Bahia horned beast. Allegedly, the picture was taken by an American in Brazil when she was just 15 years old. She took the picture and then ran away, so this is all we have as proof of this creature. The reason so many were taken aback by it is rather obvious. The thing looks like something from a nightmare, not least because of its horns and its potentially skeletal face. Ever since it was posted online, people have debated what it is and what it isn't, and what they can discern from the photo. Some have even gone to the area where the Bahia horned beast is thought to have been, hoping to get more information from those nearby and hear the local legends. I have no doubt that many local legends would spin a great tale for the curious, but the question that really needs to be answered is it real? That's not easy to prove, especially since the photograph doesn't show obvious signs of being fake. It's a very high-quality photo, ironically, but that doesn't mean it's an actual creature. There are ways to fake that, and it doesn't help that the person who posted it wasn't the girl who took the picture but a cryptid expert instead. That's not suspicious at all. Number 19. Alligator snapping turtle. Here is absolutely a creature you should fear, and for several reasons. The alligator snapping turtle is not a cute, small turtle you'd love to keep as a pet in your home or even in a fish tank. No, the alligator snapping turtle is a massive beast known for having some of the most powerful jaws in the animal kingdom. To give you some context about how big these turtles can get, the official confirmed maximum weight for an alligator snapping turtle is about 250 pounds, but an unofficial report would put it closer to 400 pounds. Yes, they do get big, but worse than their size is their bite by a long shot. This is not a cute little snapping turtle you shouldn't get bitten by but don't have to fear overall. This is a bite you should never experience. These turtles can bite through the handle of a broom, and in rare cases, there have been reports of human fingers being cleanly bitten off. That means this turtle has the power to rend flesh and bone with one simple bite, and that's something you don't want to mess with, ever. Just as scary is that it's a smart hunter. It has developed its tongue to act like a lure for bait, and when it gets close enough, it chomps down. So be mindful around these turtles, won't you? Number 18. Dolls on bamboo shafts. There are certain facts in life that are undeniable, and one of them is that if a bunch of horror movies claim a basic object can be evil or haunting, it very likely is. Dolls have been the subject of many horror films over the years, for better or worse, but mainly for the worse. So you may be asking, but that's only in horror movies, right? Well, are you sure about that? Because if you look up creepy doll stories, you'll inevitably find plenty of them. This includes one from Alabama in 2014, where apparently 21 dolls were taken, placed on bamboo stakes, and then positioned on a key road near a swamp to ensure people would see them. And oh boy, did they see them, and notice that some of these dolls didn't even have their heads anymore. By now, most people would be crying bloody murder, but not the sheriff. He noticed the dolls several weeks beforehand while driving through the swamp, working on the report of a stolen vehicle. He thought they were probably just a Halloween prank and didn't give them much thought. Yeah, that's a man who would die in a horror movie. Though he was the first to admit that the dolls were quite a sight to see when he came upon them, saying they did look kind of creepy. He laughed as he talked about how they were inventoried back at the courthouse. You could see them from the road, and they figured it was best just to round them up. Yeah, probably a good idea there, Sheriff. The swamp itself has a reputation for unique things going on, so perhaps somebody was just trying to play into that, but that's a whole lot of work for one simple prank. Number 17. Homo algus. You don't know what to make of this one, do you? The scientific name for this thing may be throwing you off because you don't know if it's a plant or an animal I'm talking about, or what kind in particular. However, that's where the rub is. This is not a plant or a creature. It's actually a statue made by a French woman who places these things in Marais Nature Reserve of Sena in the Gulf of France. The figures are modeled with mud and seaweed, and with the algae drying within the elements, the colors, textures, and skin of the creatures change over time, along with the organic landscape in which they inhabit. The sculptures offer a chance for onlookers to not only visit the site but also engage in dialogue about biodiversity and our relationship to these lands. So yes, it is a bit random, and when you look at these creatures you can't help but wonder what really drove the woman to make such a thing. Apparently, it was because she saw some mysterious creatures in the swamp one day and decided to pay that forward by making her homo algus, putting them in swamps herself. She's using them to truly invite the swamp creatures out into the world to be seen and interact with the statues, and possibly other things. No, I won't say I fully get it, but you can't deny that if something works, it should be praised, and if nothing else, it's getting people talking about it. Number 16. The Ferryman's End. Oh, did you think the last entry was the only statue story? Well, you'd be wrong, but this one has a different twist and feel to it, I promise you that. This time around, we're not going to France, we're actually going to Ireland, specifically to a little-known place called Wicklow Park. Within, there's a place known as Victor's Way, which is, believe it or not, an acre-long private garden that has things like the Ferryman's End. But what exactly is the Ferryman's End? Well, it's one of 44 different statues made by the original owner, and they're pretty dark and scary. So much so that if you just happen to walk upon them in the area and see them, you might honestly think there was a monster in the water, and that's not very cool. So we know the last sculpture story, but what about this one? Opened in 1989 by German-born Victor Langheld, Victor's Way is described on the website as a compilation space for lone adults between approximately the ages of 28 and 65. It would take him more than 25 years to complete the design of the garden. So it's a choice, for lack of a better term. And trust me when I say there's a lot of debate about what was meant to be the intention of the contemplation said to be had in this park. Because quite frankly, unlike the last set of statues, these ones look appropriately freaky, and that raises all kinds of unique questions about them. Now it's time for today's topic. In the dense, humid swamps of Louisiana, near the outskirts of Slidell, a group of hunters stumbled upon a discovery that would haunt them forever. It was early morning when the men ventured into the swamp, tracking deer. The air was thick, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional splash of water. But as they moved deeper into the marsh, they noticed something unusual, a foul stench that grew stronger with every step. Following the smell, they came across a shallow, murky pool partially hidden by overgrown reeds. At first, they thought it was an animal carcass, but as they got closer, their blood ran cold. Floating in the water were human body parts, severed hands, legs, and other remains, some partially decomposed. The hunters immediately backed away and called the local authorities. Within hours, the area was swarming with police and forensic teams. The swamp was cordoned off, and divers were brought in to search for more evidence. Authorities have yet to identify the remains or determine how they ended up in such a remote location. The discovery has left the small community shaken, with many fearing a serial killer may be lurking in the shadows of the Louisiana swamps. Number 15. The Swamp Ghost. Thankfully, this isn't a story about an actual ghost in a swamp, but rather about a plane that was named the Swamp Ghost. More specifically, this is about how the plane got its name. It was a B-17E Flying Fortress. Captain Frederick "Fred" C. Eaton Jr. was its pilot during the Second World War, and along with his crew, they were out in the skies above New Britain, trying to complete their mission of taking out an enemy freighter. But as bad luck would have it, their first pass was a failure because of a mechanical issue with the doors. Though they were able to get another pass in and drop their explosive payload, it came at the cost of being found by Japanese aircraft. These enemy planes weren't afraid to shoot at the bomber. They succeeded in heavily damaging the plane, and Eaton did all he could to try and land it in a safe spot as he flew back to New Guinea. However, the options were slim and he ended up in a swamp. Some of the remaining crew traveled for 6 weeks before getting back to safety, and then they got a new plane and continued to fly during the rest of the war. But as for the original plane, it remained in the swamp for many years. Eventually, the Swamp Ghost nickname caught on when a plane in 1972 spotted it, still lying there. It's terrifying to think of what the crew had to go through, but they still kept on fighting through the war. The plane didn't get the best send-off, but it had a memorable life, no doubt. Number 14. Amazonian Giant Centipedes. There are some things in the world that you not only don't want to meet, but you don't want to find crawling on you without your knowledge. Amazonian giant centipedes are definitely on that list. You can usually find them in tropical and subtropical rainforests of western and northern South America, and they also inhabit areas of the Caribbean, including Jamaica, the U.S. Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, St. Martin, Grenada, Trinidad, and Tobago, along with the Seychelles, Puerto Rico, and more. So yeah, they have quite the reach, and that's bad for those who never want to see things like this. For the record, I'm among those people who never want to see them in person. And if you're curious, the Amazonian giant centipede is typically about a foot long, if not a little shorter at times, but that's more than enough to scare you. They are, in fact, the largest member of their family. They have from 42 to 46 pale yellow legs, which no doubt look incredibly creepy up close as they're crawling all over you. Another reason to dislike them is that they're known to be incredibly aggressive hunters, to the extent that they're willing to eat just about anything they can catch. But don't worry, they don't try to kill humans, at least not that we know of. Yet despite their scary size, they're known to be a vital part of the ecosystems they inhabit, including helping to get rid of bugs in such numbers that farmers actually benefit from them, believe it or not. showing that just because something's scary doesn't mean it doesn't have a purpose. Number 13. Amazonian whale. When it comes right down to it, anything that's beached from the waters can be terrifying in its own right. Not least of which is that decomposition is not something many of you want to experience for yourselves. But when you find something like a humpback whale in the swamps of the Amazon, you're going to ask questions. Not least of which is, how the heck did it even get there in the first place? When it was found in 2019, the people who discovered it definitely weren't sure. Not least of which was that the beaching clearly happened soonish after they found it. Which was odd because the whale pod it would have been with should have been close to Antarctica at that point and nowhere near the Amazon. The people who found it imagined that it may have been floating, and the tide took it into the mangrove. But the question is, what was a humpback whale doing in the month of February on the northern coast of Brazil? It is very unusual indeed, for as noted, these types of whales love to travel in pods, and as a result, getting way apart from the pod is unusual. As a result, some think that this may have been a younger whale who got separated from its mother and wandered around until it ended up in the Amazon. Number 12. Anacondas. You may recall certain films starring this breed of snake, and some of them do indeed take place in swamp-like areas, and that's not inaccurate in the slightest. Many anacondas in the world today prefer to live near the water, as they can not only hunt in it, but they can also swim through it and even blend in with it a bit more to get closer to what they perceive as prey. No, that typically doesn't apply to humans unless it's a movie, but would you really want to test it out? Furthermore, given that plenty of anacondas live in swamps, and swamps are very much able to blend things into the environment as a whole, you might have a much harder time finding this snake. And I haven't even gotten to the worst parts yet. For example, the green anaconda species is the longest snake in the world today, at times being well over 30 feet long, which is basically 5 times the size of an average human. Anacondas are rather large serpents, but the way they kill is truly monstrous. They don't bite you to death, they'll actually squeeze you to death. Yes, they straight up constrict you until you can't breathe, and then you die, and then they consume you whole. And just to be clear, while anacondas don't actively hunt humans, that doesn't mean they won't eat them if they're hungry. Snakes have consumed humans whole before. There's actually proof of it. So the moral of the story is, just be careful when you go to the swamp next time. Number 11. Toxic sludge. This one's a bit of a twist because I'm talking about something literally swamping an area. In this case, a popular beach in France. And the thing doing the swamping was a bunch of algae, which may actually be toxic in the numbers it was in. Not to mention that they reeked of rotten eggs, which is not the kind of smell you want when you're going on vacation. Part of the reason for that smell is that the algae is literally rotting in place, and because it's all over the beach and sand, people couldn't just bypass it to get to the water. Plus, would you really risk some of that touching you? I don't think so. This naturally upset the natural balance of the area to the point where they had to close the beach and restrict access to the cabins that were there. Families that had been going to that beach and those cabins for decades were suddenly kept back because the toxic algae was truly all over the place. It's not really the kind of story you'd be expecting, but nature always wins. Number 10. Nuclear bomb. Now, I'm not joking about this one, nor am I telling a story that kind of happened in a swamp. There's an actual nuclear bomb that just so happens to still be in the place it was accidentally dropped, and that place would just so happen to be in North Carolina in swamp country. This occurred in the 1960s during the peak of the Cold War. A nuclear bomber was flying over North Carolina on a patrol route with 2 nuclear bombs in its belly, but then everything went wrong, and the plane suddenly broke apart, killing some of its crew and almost blowing up the bomb itself. The 2 bombs were launched out into the world, and one of them landed safely on a tree, while the other fell right into the swamp and broke apart. Once it was discovered, well, most of it anyway, it was found that one of the bombs was literally just 1 step away from exploding, and it only didn't due to a malfunction. How's that for a sobering thought, Tar Heels? Number 9. Bones. If you were to find bones in a swamp, you probably wouldn't be all that surprised. It's a swamp, and bad things happen there. But when a story was found about a swamp that was said to be so full of bones that you only needed to reach in to grab them, people then sought it out. Hence why a major discovery was made where they did indeed find a swamp that had a ton of bones inside. But not only bones, it was the bones of extinct animals, ones that helped paint a very clear picture of what the ecosystem was like back in the past. This is the kind of treasure trove that continues to keep on giving to this day because you can learn a lot from just bones. But when you get to paint a picture of the past, that's even better for some. Number 8. Bayou corn sinkhole. By and large, sinkholes are one of the most terrifying parts of our world, not least of which is because they can truly form anywhere at any time if the conditions are met, and if they don't hit a plateau, they can grow to incredible sizes. Case in point, in Louisiana, there's a bayou called Bayou corn sinkhole, a sinkhole that's infamous because it took over a year for the state to even realize what was happening with it, and by the time they did, it had grown to the size of 24 acres. You'll likely have seen the now famous YouTube video of the sinkhole, well and truly swallowing everything in its path as a person on the water watches. That was real, and the sinkhole is so large that you can actually find it on Google Maps. Number 7. Great Dismal Swamp. With a name like the Great Dismal Swamp, you honestly probably wouldn't expect much of a good thing to come out of it. But that's the twist about history. Sometimes the most dismal of places are where hope can spring eternal. And no, I'm not just waxing poetic. I'm talking about how when researchers have really examined the Great Dismal Swamp, they found something very interesting. What would that be? Well, how about the traces of a hidden community? Yes, there were people who lived in this swamp, and the common theory is that they were slaves trying to flee from the south to the north on the Underground Railroad. This was believed to be one of the stops of the area, due to how there were plenty of plantations around where the slaves were being held. Archaeologists have uncovered remnants of small cabins, tools, and even pottery, suggesting a self-sustaining community that thrived in secrecy. The dense, almost impenetrable terrain of the swamp provided a natural fortress against pursuers, making it an ideal refuge. Stories passed down through generations hint at the resilience and ingenuity of those who carved out a life in this harsh environment. Some believe the swamp's isolation allowed for the preservation of African traditions and culture, creating a unique blend of survival and identity. If this really is the case, then this is an important swamp because it may have saved some people's lives. Number 6. Sugar Idol. In 1894, gold prospectors digging up a peat bog near the Russian city of something I'm not going to attempt to pronounce unearthed something bizarre. A carved wooden idol over 15 feet long, which is a pretty big idol, I would say. Furthermore, the front and the back of the idol were apparently covered in faces and hands. For more than a century, the statue was displayed as a curiosity in a museum, assumed to be at most a few thousand years old. But now, people actually believe that it's more like 11,000 years old, which makes it much more ancient, and some even think that the faces and hands, along with the head on top, are actually some kind of symbol for demons and the taboo. The intricate carvings, which include zigzag patterns and geometric shapes, have sparked debates among archaeologists about their meaning and purpose. Some theorize that the idol served as a spiritual guide or a map of the cosmos for the ancient people who created it. The preservation of the wood in the peat bog is nothing short of miraculous, offering a rare glimpse into the artistry and beliefs of prehistoric cultures. The sugar idol is now considered one of the oldest known wooden sculptures in the world, a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of early humans. And that's why the ancient rule of horror movies still remains. If something looks evil when you dig it up, just put it back in the ground. Number 5. Swamp King Gator. There's a lot going on in just that name, and it's only going to get more grand from here, I can promise you that. Most unearthed in southeast Queensland in the 1980s, a prehistoric crocodile measuring over 16 feet was certainly a sight to behold once it was dug up. This was a swamp king, as it was known, and identified by a team of researchers from the University of Queensland. Apparently, it was one of the top predators of Australia back in its time. Its massive jaws, lined with razor-sharp teeth, could crush bones with ease, making it a fearsome hunter in its ancient ecosystem. The Swamp King Gator's thick, armored skin provided it with unparalleled protection, allowing it to dominate its environment without fear of rivals. Fossils suggest it had a diet that included large mammals, fish, and even other reptiles, showcasing its versatility as a predator. Its discovery has shed light on the diversity of prehistoric crocodiles and their role in shaping Australia's ancient landscapes. Some of you might note that this isn't the biggest crocodile the modern world has ever seen, and that would be true, but it did have features that made it very powerful and very tough to kill, so it's worthy of being labeled as a king. Number 4. Old Crogan Man. So what is an old Crogan man? Well, he's said to have been an ancient kelp that was placed into a bog as part of a ceremony, and it's named after a nearby hill. As a result of the study, it's believed that this old Crogan man was actually a king or even a prince, but that's honestly hard to determine for various reasons. Not least of which was that in the time this man was said to have died, Ireland was divided up between 150 different tribes, each with their own ruler. Due to the way the bones aged, it's believed that he was 2,000 years old, making him a very key part of history in his own right. The bog's unique preservation properties kept his body remarkably intact, allowing researchers to study his remains in great detail. His hands, for example, were found to be unusually large and well-manicured, suggesting he was someone of high status who didn't engage in manual labor. Some theories suggest he may have been a sacrificial victim, offered to the gods in a ritual to ensure the prosperity of his people. The discovery of a leather armband and other artifacts near his body further supports the idea that he was a person of significance. The old Crogan man's death was likely violent, as evidence of stab wounds and decapitation were found on his remains. Despite the gruesome nature of his death, his preservation has provided invaluable insights into the rituals and beliefs of Iron Age Ireland. There's still not a lot known about this time in Celtic history, given all the warring factions and the ways that bodies like this could be buried, so finding one like this is important indeed. Number 3. The Windover Cemetery. A cemetery in the swamp, well, why not at this point? Since its discovery in 1982, this small peat-bottomed pond, situated roughly between Cape Canaveral and Disney World in east-central Florida, has offered up no fewer than 168 burials. Oh, but that's not the terrifying part. The terrifying part is that when all of these bodies were brought up, there was nothing left of them but the bones and their brains. Yes, really, when brought up, their bones and brains were perfectly preserved at times, and that's food for thought. The acidic, low-oxygen environment of the swamp acted as a natural preservative, halting decomposition and leaving the brains remarkably intact. Researchers were stunned to find that some of the brains still contained traces of DNA, offering a rare glimpse into the lives of these ancient people. The burials date back over 7,000 years, making Windover one of the most significant archaeological sites in North America. Many of the bodies were found wrapped in fabric, suggesting that the swamp was a sacred burial ground for the community. Some of the remains showed signs of injuries or illnesses, providing clues about the health and lifestyle of these early inhabitants. The discovery of tools, weapons, and other artifacts alongside the bodies further enriched our understanding of their culture. Despite the eerie nature of the find, the Windover Cemetery has become a treasure trove for scientists studying prehistoric human life. Now, I know it honestly sounds really weird that people would put bodies in a swamp like this, but to certain people, it might have been considered a great mercy or even a perfect way to preserve them for time immemorial. Number 2. T-34 tank. Now look, I don't want to insult anyone, but you really have to be pretty stupid to drive a tank into a swamp. In World War II, a Russian-built T-34 tank was captured by the Germans, repainted, and then used as their own. It was either stuck in a battle or abandoned by the Germans during the retreat, and thus remained in the swamp. This was a solid tank as well. The Soviets kept using and reusing these tanks, so the Germans honestly had something special on their hands, but it's just too bad they couldn't keep it out of the muck. The T-34 was renowned for its durability, firepower, and mobility, making it a formidable weapon on the battlefield. Its sloped armor design was revolutionary, offering better protection against enemy fire while keeping the tank relatively lightweight. The Germans, recognizing its value, often repurposed captured T-34s for their own use, though they struggled to maintain them due to a lack of spare parts. The swamp, with its thick mud and murky waters, proved to be an unforgiving trap for the tank, swallowing it whole and preserving it for decades. Over the years, the submerged T-34 became a relic of war, a silent witness to the chaos and destruction of the Eastern Front. Locals would occasionally spot parts of the tank peeking out of the swamp, sparking rumors and legends about its origins. Efforts to recover the tank have been made, but the swamp's grip is strong, and the tank remains partially buried, a testament to the harsh realities of war. Despite its unfortunate fate, the T-34's legacy lives on as one of the most iconic tanks of World War II. It's just too bad they couldn't keep it out of the muck. Number 1. Bog butter. Just to be clear, I am absolutely not hungry for any of this. The creamy white dairy product, which smells like a strong cheese and is believed to be about 2,000 years old, was unearthed by a man by the name of Jack Conway. Yes, it is real, and it is a huge thing of butter. Apparently, many would bury their butter in bogs in order to preserve it for later, a tactic that was used by many peoples in ancient times. The practice of burying butter in bogs was not just about preservation. It was also a way to protect it from thieves and invaders. Some believe the cool, anaerobic environment of the bog helped to slow down the spoilage process, keeping the butter edible for years, if not centuries. Archaeologists have found bog butter in wooden containers, barrels, and even wrapped in animal skins, showing the ingenuity of ancient preservation methods. The butter itself often takes on a waxy texture and a pungent odor, which some describe as a mix of cheese and earth. While it might sound unappetizing to us today, it was a valuable resource for ancient communities, especially during times of scarcity. Some even speculate that bog butter was used in rituals or as offerings to the gods, given its significance in daily life. The discovery of bog butter has provided insights into the diets and survival strategies of our ancestors, making it a fascinating, if not slightly gross, piece of history. Now, I'm not going to even try to pretend to know how tasty it might have been after being bogged, but what I do know is that I want no part of it. That concludes our journey into the eerie and unsettling world of swamps and the terrifying things that have been discovered within them. Does this make you swear off swamps for good? Which of these entries had the highest scare factor for you? And have you ever encountered something strange or unusual in a swamp? Be sure to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below. Don't forget to check out the other fascinating content appearing on the screen, and I'll see you next time.